guess we are. The microphone's on now. It's a good thing I wasn't here humming to myself. All right, let's do it. Hi.
Couldn't hear you back there.
I'll come closer there. Now you can hear me. All right, good afternoon. I'm the last thing between you and a booze. Datascript tips and trips. Tips and tricks. Thank you. All right, so hopefully everybody already knows Avi. Everybody's already familiar with the basics, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward. Okay. Data plane scripting language, Datascript. Yeah, there we go. Tips and tricks. All right, a couple things about Avi that are worth calling out. We have a centralized control plane, distributed data plane, right? The data scripts are a data plane scripting language that are executed at the data plane, at the service engines, being executed against live traffic. Separately, we have control script. Control script is on the control plane. I was the first product manager at Avi, and I'm not very creative. So we just kind of call it what it is. It's data plane scripting called Datascript. That pretty much goes par for the course. I don't know. But just kind of a couple things to keep in mind is that data scripts are exclusively being executed here on the service engines with live, real traffic, unrelated to control script. Control script is Python, really. It's just a Python script that runs in a sandbox on the controller and does something if a control plane event happens. Totally different world, totally different problem set, everything. So if you like, what is a data script? The whole purpose of a data script is that we can inspect, modify, and do something with live customer traffic. As the traffic's coming in, going through here, we can intercept this, we can do something with it, take advantage of that for all sorts of purposes. If that's going to be for the purpose of being able to modify traffic. This is a good example of square peg round hole. Traffic comes in, the client is sending /index.html, and the server expects /foo.index.html. Whoops, yeah, okay, that's a problem. So fine, traffic comes through and we'll just mark it up or change it or fix it. This is one example of modifying traffic, but it could be modifying, inspecting. You could do all sorts of things with this or a lot of purpose with this. So the actual Datascript components is just normal scripting. Datascript is based on Lua. Lua's been around for a little while now. Lua's a fantastic little language. It's super lightweight, it's super fast, it's super efficient. Probably most of you, I'm guessing, are familiar with iRules. With that, anybody in here? One of you? Oh, all right, never mind then. All right. You're the oddball. I didn't expect that. But there's other vendors have kind of a similar concept, and they're based upon Tickle. Tickle or TCL is a deprecated language from a million years ago. Lua is the same thing, but it's faster, not deprecated. It's a quarter of a century newer and fewer squiggly brackets. But otherwise, it's about the same thing. It's your basic thing. You're attaching this to an event. There's various functions. There's the official Lua functions, and then there's Avi-specific functions that we've created that are specific to load balancing. Avi.vs. Do something, whatever, I don't know, get IP, operators, etc. Couple things about this. When talking about best practices for data scripts, the number one best practice for Datascript is don't use it. Sorry, I know that kind of deflates the rest of my presentation, but it's really true. Don't use it. Don't use it if you don't need it. I know a lot of us like doing really fun, kind of crazy, cool scripting because it's cool. Like, that's nice, but did you need to do that, or could you have just hit that checkbox over there and pushed the button? That's the. If you're doing something with native functionality, it's executing in native C code. It's fast. Datascript is fast, but it ain't C code fast. So it's always going to be computationally more expensive to do anything in here than it is to do something further up here. Even things like policies. Policies within Avi is kind of point and click. Think of it as a point and click scripting. It is still native C code under the hood. So if you need to do something really simple modification of traffic or inject a header, policy is where you should do it. And the reason for that is keep it simple. That also means somebody else can come along later and, now a lot of people like the idea that if I write some really complex code and some really complex script, I can never be fired. And there's some truth to that, and I can't argue with that. And if that's the case, that's on you, whatever. But I have done many a time when customers have said, I've got this script here from a previous whatever, and it's 2 pages long of code, and you're reading and reading and rereading and trying to figure out what's, you're like, wait, all you're doing is an HTTP HTTPS redirect. I think think that's all this is doing, but it's 2 pages worth of complex code. So I do know some of you out there that do this stuff for the fun of it, just to make it be complicated. Yeah, don't. Got it? A couple things about this as well is that doing things in Datascript is explicit, meaning you tell it to do something, it's going to do something. You tell it to redirect to HTTPS, it will do just that. You don't have an HTTPS listener, a virtual service on HTTPS, that's your problem. It's going to black hole that traffic. If you do something in the profile, it's implicit. So if you do an HTTP to HTTPS redirect and you don't have anybody listening on HTTPS, it won't redirect. It will do it if it thinks it'll work. Otherwise, it'll say, I know you told me to do that, but I'm not going to bother. This is explicit. It's going to do what you told it to do. So, yeah, number one thing, don't use data scripts if you don't need to. A next kind of important bit here is the order of precedence. This is something that can kind of get a little bit messy. As traffic comes in, we're full proxy. We're terminating TCP, and then we go up the stack, and we're terminating SSL, and we're HTTP all the way up the stack, do whatever processing, inject WAF, et cetera, and then we go back down the stack and do the same thing, kick it out the other end. What this means is that from an order of event precedence, where you start injecting these things makes a difference. You know, we're doing all of these steps throughout here, right? But now if we want to go and inject data scripts or policies or profiles, they get injected here, there. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. And my beautiful build just went haywire. Thank you. Okay, so in case of something like this, HTTP protocol validation, meaning that the traffic comes in, we check to see if it's a valid HTTP request. If for some reason it's not a valid HTTP request, then we're just going to drop it right there. Well, you've got a data script up here saying, I want to go and modify this request when I get the HTTP request. You're not going to get it because we dropped it down here because it was not valid. So if you wanted to do that, you need to do that down here at layer 4 and modify it here at layer 4 because HTTP, the HTTP parser is going to reject it. And so if the HTTP parser rejects it, then an event, a data script event at HTTP will never see it. Make sense? So what the order precedence, if you're doing something like you have a policy that says if somebody comes in, discard, well, then your data script is never going to, So keep in mind that order of precedence makes a big difference and all of these different events here, they all kind of fill in different places in different orders. Some of it makes sense, but just something to keep in mind is that order precedence can sometimes blow you up. All right, troubleshooting data scripts. There's basically 2 ways a data script fails. Here's a really simple example. If the avi.vs.client IP equals 10.1.1.1, then do a bunch of things. And this is going to fail because not really, yeah. Okay, so there's syntax failure and then there's configuration error. This is a configuration error where I just set something like this and it's going to error out and give me a big ugly error message, failed to compile data script, blah. So drop client and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of walking you through what we're expecting. And it's saying it's expecting something, it's failed on an equals near obby. And so what it's saying here is that we have obby.http.close. It's expecting here, it's saying up here you have it, what it's actually, this is where it kind of gets cryptic, trying to figure out what the error messages are saying. Up here you see ABC. That means it sounds to me like you're declaring a variable. So ABC should equal that is what it's thinking, but you didn't put an equals in there. The kind of quirky thing about Lua is that Lua doesn't really care all that much about spaces or carriage returns. The fact that this is on another line, we're kind of looking, this is actually the equivalent of being on that same line. And so that's what kind of throws you off there is that it's saying we're looking for, what do you mean an equals near obby? It's assuming that ABC equals this. So some of this kind of can throw you off a little bit on some of this where you're looking at line 3 and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? So when you're looking at configuration errors, those are going to be caught when you try saving the data script. Easy enough most of the time. So an example of something like this, a valid version of this is ABC equals whatever. So that DEF equals to G, whatever, right? So that's a better constructed. The other variation of this is that there's a logic errors. Hope you can read this in the back. A logic error if this A equals 1, B equals 2, if A plus B equals 3, then do whatever, some logic, right? Okay, that's true. And then if that's true, then log A plus B plus C. We never declared C. The parser is not going to catch this. But so this won't get caught until runtime, meaning when someone's actually going and hitting the site, this gets executed and this is going to fail and poof. And so when you see a failure like this, a logic error, you'll see this failure. 2 things are going to happen. One which is the client's going to get a 500 error message saying 500, this page is dead. From a troubleshooting perspective, go into the logs. If you go into logs, do a search for 500s, and then when you go into logs, click on the view all headers on that particular transaction, and that's when it's going to give you whatever it's going to say in here. Line 4, attempting to perform arithmetic on C, a null value. Well, yep, that's true. So when you're looking at doing troubleshooting, the config errors, obviously, it tells you right up front, like, hey, you have something really obvious broken. Logic errors, though, you'll see these in the logs. Good enough? But that's sort of one of those things where, like, how do I figure this out? How do I see what's going on? It's there. The data's there. It's really cool, but that's where you'll go and see that. If we're doing this, or we're spitting out a 500 error message, if we're going to spit out a 500 error message to the clients, make it be a pretty one. You can change up that error message so it looks interesting, pretty. Put in your own HTML, do your company, colors and logos, and everybody likes to do like a little whale or a bird or whatever I don't know. Put in your little fail message, but you can go and inject that within the virtual service itself. So if we go and edit a virtual service, I don't know, whichever one, you'll see down here this error page profile, custom error page profile. And this is where you can go and create, modify, or adjust one of your own. So there's one in there already, but we can just go and add another one if we want to do this. And we can say this is going to be explicitly for 500 error messages, and I want it to be this page. All this is just HTML. And go and put your HTML page in there. Injecting into that HTML, though, you can also inject into that HTML additional flags here. Those little $ status, VS name, request ID. So if you inject that in there, we're going to replace that with status code 500 for virtual service name, whatever. So we're going to change that HTML and inject that into it. And the request ID, which this is just a unique serial number for every transaction. So if somebody calls and says, hey, your site's giving me an error message, like, great, can you read off the last 4 characters of the request ID? Type that into the logs field and it'll pop up their transaction. Then you can pop up that error message and you can go and see Datascript failed because XYZ was, you had a logic error. So this is how you kind of go about that. So that's how you can have a nice pretty error message rather than your site just imploded. Obviously for you guys, none of you will have to worry about errors or logic problems. That's my life. Yeah. We can always inject additional data as well into the logs. So avi.vs.log, log this. So you can keep injecting this stuff. So if you're really complex data script, you want to make sure it got to this stage, got to that stage. What data did it have in that variable? Then log that data that's in that variable and log whatever it is you want. That's going to drop in just a normal Avi log. In the normal Avi log, though, it's going to have an additional field in that log that says whatever that's going to be. So if you go into logs like this, so if you just go into the normal Avi logs of the virtual service, there'll be one additional field in here saying Datascript log and whatever your data is that you injected into there. So it's not creating its own unique log. It's just using the existing logging engine and adding one more field into the list of fields. So it'll look something like this. Datascript log SSL redirect. That's the name of our. This will be the name of our the name of the Datascript that's executing this. Line 2, and then whatever data I put in there. Nathan was here. Probably should have made that wider, but cool. Logs are awesome. What's that? Yeah.
Once you have 2 logs, they don't line up anymore.
Oh yeah, if you do multiple, it kind of just munches right in there. They're trying to refactor the way the logs look, by the way, and then they went and they made it like huge. Like, all right, went from too compact to like huge. Like, come on, can we have something in between, please? Nope. Add an extra parameter.
Yeah, like you go through Cloudflare and then through obviously we got that like the Cloudflare request ID also.
Yeah, if we can inject anything into a header, or we could inject it into that field. Yeah, if we.
Like it's got response link that you guys have Cloudflare.
Oh, you're saying could we have an additional logging? Yeah, okay. So if I'm going through Cloudflare and they're injecting some data, something like that, you can have a Datascript go and grab that data, inject it into the log. It'll come up as a Datascript field, not as a custom field. I can do things like custom metrics, but not custom log fields. There would be a Datascript log, but yeah, because what could happen is if you have multiple multiple here. They're all under that one umbrella, and you want them separated.
It'd be nice to search too, because like you get a cloud vector, we have a Cloudflare or
Yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah. So yes, you can use Datascript to do that, but no, it's not as, yeah, visually, it's only so pretty. Yeah, that'd be a thinking about that. Okay. Next, kind of a best practice that I would strongly recommend is a reflector page. Especially if you're dealing with like HTML and you're dealing with HTTP and you're trying to modify this, change that, do something, strongly recommend something like this. So in this case, I'm doing something like if the path equals this, then change the path to that. And you're modifying this, changing that. Did I do it right? Did I not? And then you're doing this with live traffic. And you're like, I don't know, it probably works. I think it works. I don't know. I assume it works. Put in a reflector page. And the reflector page basically is, here's my HTML page that I'm going to. I'm going to go and modify something and then see what it looks like on the other end. So in this example here, you're coming in, you're hitting this, I'm hitting this virtual service that's going to go and modify the URL. And then instead of hitting my web server, I'm going to use my reflector page as the web server, and it's just going to reflect back what it saw. I find this to be hugely helpful that I use just a test to make sure I got it right, that it looks good. This is what the server saw. So here's what so strongly recommend this. You're welcome to cheat and just take mine. But this is what I use, is something like this. And all this is the Datascript also. I don't actually have web servers in my environment because I'm lazy. But also too, because people are always trying to hack them and whatever, hack my Datascript, I dare you. But this just reflects back a bunch of headers and things like this. And that way, if I want to go and change the IP address, or if I want to go and inject a header or something, I'll see right there what the server saw. Now, the quirky thing about this and about doing this on Avi is, what you want to do is, I've got one virtual service here that it's doing the modification, and then I'm pointing traffic to a server. If you have a server that can do this already, terrific, good on you. I don't. I use a Datascript as a server. Now, the quirky thing about doing this is what I'm doing a VIP target VIP. I have one virtual service, and it points to a server in the pool, but that server in the pool is not a server, it's another virtual service. Now, the quirky thing about that is that if you do that, you can, but you have to keep both of these on two separate service engines. Welcome to having a distributed architecture. It's one area where it kind of blows up a little bit. Otherwise, if it's on one service engine, it goes in and it creates an asymmetric route inside of itself, and it goes, and its head explodes. So the question is, now how do I make that happen? In order to guarantee that these are on separate service engines, you can do that in the actual virtual service. The best way to do that, though, is what I do is I just create a separate service engine group with one SE, and I put this reflector in here. So that's what I do, and that's how I do it. So if you're ever going through, and like if you take any of the Avi classes and you're going through the labs, that's what I'm, and you're going through and testing stuff out and hitting like some of these reflectors, that's under the hood what I'm doing is I'm using this reflector page so you can validate your changes, and I put that on SE Group 2, and then you're over here creating on SE Group 1, and that way I can guarantee that they're on separate service engines. We don't create some crazy routing, ugliness, asymmetric path, or anything like that. So it's just one of those things that initially you're like, it doesn't work. Like, no, it does. Fun little tip there. Cool. If we're going through and looking at some of these data scripts, close. Yes, if you're going looking at some of these, I've got these posted, by the way, and they are available. So if you guys ever want to go and take a look, if you've ever taken any of the classes at Avi, you're always welcome to go and steal my stuff because it's right there on the controller, so everyone has access to it. But you can go and grab this, do this, do that, take it away. I've got things like, if you're going to the site, here's access. Here's the lab guide walking to the lab. This whole lab guide page is this is just a data script that's, when the request comes in, reflect back this HTML code, and it's just a bunch of HTML code I inject in there. I'm also doing some extra little fun things, like in this case, we try to geolocate and send you back to the closest data center based upon where you're coming from around the world. That's all just a data script that's sending you back there, which usually works. The only problem with that, it basically actually works really well. It works too well is the problem, because I'm over here on my US site and no, the site's up. Like, no, I'm getting redirected to Europe, and like, oh, sorry, I forgot to check Europe is up. But yeah, so it's not GSLB, but the point is you can do some kind of fun, crazy, kind of interesting stuff with this. Some other things about data scripts. is that are kind of quirky is that because we're a distributed system, you get into some interesting things. When I create a virtual service, it gets placed or pushed down to a service engine, or service engines plural. The config gets pushed down to it. Things like that virtual service points to this pool. So then the pool config gets pushed down to it. But if I'm doing something like this, like when the traffic comes in, obvi.pool.select and select pool A. Great. Well, pool A needs to be on that service engine. And this example of, I can dynamically select a pool to send you to based upon A.com, B.com, N.com. Traffic comes in and boom, we send it away. If somebody puts in there randomnumber.com, we're going to go and send you to pool randomnumber.com. The problem is that pool may actually exist on Avi, but it does not exist on the service engine. Make sense? Because the controller never knew that you needed that. So in other words, the controller needs to be told that you need to go and attach that. So one of the things that you'll see in here, in the actual Datascript itself, is you can see things like pools, pool groups, IP groups, all of these. There's other objects that you may need to attach and associate with this Datascript, and that way that additional config gets pushed down to that service engine. Like in the case of my my lab guide, where it's directing you to wherever it's directing you to. Well, I do that by saying here's a mapping of which countries map to which data center, et cetera. That has to get pushed down to that service engine. Otherwise, that service engine can't, So we have to statically assign things like this, which is why you're like, that's kind of interesting. Why do I have to do that? Well, that's why. Is because otherwise, you make a selection like this, and like, whoops, that config does not exist. Oops. And I've got kind of one more on the tips and tricks here. Quotes. You can do single quotes in Lua. You can use double quotes in Lua. You can escape quotes. You know what you can't do though? Is use any Microsoft product, like Outlook. You go and use, or PowerPoint. I go and I take my Datascript. I copy it into PowerPoint here, and what does it do? It changes the quotes to these cute little, Microsoft quotes. So if you want to copy paste my Datascript and put it onto your controller, and it's going to fail on you. I have a feature request that's been outstanding for a decade now, saying please allow me to use Microsoft quotes. The cute little slap. That drives me nuts. I know that's dumb, but it really drives me nuts, and blows up all the time. You guys have any questions? I'm like talking a million miles an hour because I feel like I'm trying to cover everything in 3 minutes or less. Have any of you guys actually actively been doing data scripting? Have coded? Okay, everybody in the back row is an expert. I see. Yeah, that's where all the cool kids are hanging out at the back of the bus. I see. As far as you can solve some really interesting and really complex problems. It's not perfect. It's not a panacea. It's not going to do everything that you need and then some, but it's actually surprisingly good. A couple other things as well. GitHub.com/VMware/blah blah 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 blah. There are a lot of samples out there already. So if you're going out, we've got a bunch of samples on all sorts of different, whatever use cases or whatever it is you might be looking for. Feel free to kind of go and dig around through here and just start with examples. Don't code from scratch. Way too much work. Most cases, there's something that's already out there that's been doing it. If you want to look at, starting from this point, and then also the other place to look at is go roll back here. Obviously, go through the docs themselves, and the docs have some examples in there as well as the definition of the functions, all of these things. Easy enough to get started. Datascript is remarkably powerful. It's very cool. It's a lot of fun. You can do some really absurd things with it. I mean, it's a scripting language, right? It's as powerful as you want it to be. It's Lua. It's extraordinarily useful. But again, take it back to, if you don't need to, don't do it. The other thing I do want to call out as well, for those of you that are used to iRules, which is F5's version of scripting, Lua, we've been putting a lot of effort of late, really reinvigorating a lot of effort into Datascripts overall, and also the migration of iRules to Datascripts. In the past, our config converter would convert the config, but iRules are just kind of like, good luck on that. We've been using, here it is, AI. You have to, come on, I have to say it. But yeah, we have building out this basically as a massive database of rules and having it convert the rules for us, and having it convert from Lua, from Tickle to Lua into our own language. So it's not 100% there yet. So that's why I'm not going to talk about it at all publicly. But it's really cool. But it's the hard challenge about is what we're doing is knowing when to convert one script to another script and knowing when to not, knowing when to convert it to a policy or when to convert it to a profile knob. So it's some interesting challenges that we have there, because our goal again is don't use a script if you don't have to use a script. So there's still some challenges there, but we're putting a lot of effort into that. It's amazing how much effort they're putting in. It's pretty cool to see, just to make it easier to onboard, etc. With that, I'm out of time, and he's like, I'm gonna shoot me here. All right, thank you very much for your time. Hope you learned some interesting kind of tips and tricks on Datascripts.